What a great honor and a schus it is for me to join you today and talk a little about Ura. I'd like to begin with a beautiful story that I heard a number of years ago. Rav Yaakov Haber was a Rav in Muncie. He was traveling down the 17 on the way back from the mountains to his home. It was very late at night and he felt very tired. So he opened the window to get a fresh breath of fresh air. He turned on the music to try and waken himself, but it wasn't working. He felt that he needed a black coffee. As he's driving on the deserted road, he spots a shop. He pulls up to the store, and he goes inside hoping to get his precious glass of coffee. As he walks inside, he smells the smell of trefa meat permeates the air. He walks up to the counter, and he's surprised by the greeting of a gentleman that was standing there. The man says, "Shalom, Rabbi." So Rabbi Haber, seeing him, says, "Shalom Aleichem." So it's this Israeli guy that was standing behind the counter, and he says, "Rabbi, in America, this is what they teach you? Aleichem is plural. You're not talking to two people, you're only talking to me." So he says, when I talk to you, I'm not only talking to you. Rabbi Haber said, every person has two malachim that accompany him wherever he goes. There's a malach on your right side, and there's a malach on your left side. So when I say shalom to you, I'm saying shalom to you and your malachim. You and your angels. So the Israeli man says, Rabbi, you and your angels. I don't believe in that stuff. I can't believe you believe in it. The man goes and gets him his coffee. He gives it to Rabbi Haber, and Rabbi Haber goes on his way. A few weeks later, Rabbi Haber was driving down the 17 again, on his way to his home in Muncie. And once again, he felt very tired. It was late at night, and he said, "You know what? I need a cup of coffee. Where can I go?" He says, He remembers the Israeli man in the shop. He goes over to the shop and he walks inside. And the moment he walks inside, the Israeli man stands up and he says, "Rabbi, you ruined my life, Rabbi. You ruined my life." He says, "I ruined your life? What are you talking about? I only met you once, a couple of weeks ago." He says, "Rabbi, you remember what you told me about those angels that accompany a person? Well, after you left, I got hungry. I wanted a midnight snack. So I took a piece of bread, I sliced it, put a ham sandwich there with a piece of cheese, and I was ready to eat the sandwich. As I'm about to eat that sandwich, all of a sudden, I see on my right side, your angels, they're steering at me. And I see on my left side, angels, they're steering me. I couldn't eat that sandwich while his angels were by my side." The rabbi, he laughed, he took his coffee, and he walked away thinking, amazingly enough, that on that day, the angels of this man protected him, stopped him from doing so many averos, at least for one day. When we talk about Ura are those angels that are standing on the right and the left of thousands of children and adults throughout America. They're there every step of the way. When a child's in public school and he wants to go to yeshiva, he wants to learn, Ura's there to pay the tuition. When a child wants to go to camp for the experience of his life, the zone camps are there to provide an amazing, fun-filled, and Torah-dika summer that will leave the child with an impression that will last forever. And throughout the cold winter nights, there are chill zones. There are 30 chill zone spots in 3 countries where boys and girls gather together each Motzei Shabbos to learn with their Torah mates. The boys in one location, the girls in another location. And that night is a night full of light. They learn Torah, they have pizza, they have a great time. And they learn to appreciate what it means to be a Torah Jew. This past Sukkot, many families came up to the Ura zone in upstate New York. And they had the yontif of their lives. Families from diverse backgrounds got together and they enjoyed a Sukkot that they'll never forget. A beautiful sukkah. They got Dal Minim. Boys were introduced to Dal Minim. They never held them before. And you should have seen the smile on their faces. Came to Chol Hamoed, and they were enjoying running around, doing all the activities that Ura has to offer. But the highlight of that yontif was Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah in Ura is a yontif like no other. The boys came, and many of them were never in a shul before. They never saw what Simchas Torah was like. They never knew that you take a Torah and dance around. And when they saw their counselors and the mashpiyim and all the rabbanim that were there gathering and dancing with the Torah, they were infused with the spirit of Ahavas HaTorah, Ahavas Hashem. One of the counselors who was there commented, you know what this scene reminds me of? Seeing these boys, their faces beaming as they dance on Simchas Torah reminds me of a scene that I heard about after the Holocaust. It was shortly after the Holocaust. And the survivors got together in shul, and there were no Torahs to be found. And they found a few young boys who had survived. And they took these young boys and started to dance with the young boys, saying, these are our Torahs. These boys represent the Torah that's going to grow one day and fill the land. And I'm reminded of a story about a great tzaddik. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Berlin. Before the war, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Berlin was one of the founders of the Beis Yaakov movement. If Sarah Schneer was known as the mother of Beis Yaakov, Rabbi Berlin was known as the father of Beis Yaakov. And he taught thousands of girls how to be an aim in Klal Yisrael, how to be a mother in Klal Yisrael. Unfortunately, his dream of creating a Beis Yaakov was cut short by the Nazis. The Nazis invaded and sent so many people to their deaths. Rabbi Berlin was in the Warsaw Ghetto. It was 1942. It was Simchas Torah. And a few men had gathered in Rabbi Menachem Zemba's shul. They took out a Torah and they started to sing. Ki mitziyoin teitzei soira. They started to sing the song of Simchas Torah. And the men didn't feel like dancing because this wasn't the Simchas Torah like other years. Other years they were surrounded by their families. Other years they had what to be happy about. Today was a bittersweet day. It was Simchas Torah, but their hearts were really broken. As Rabbi Berlin was dancing with the men, the door slowly opened up, and in walked a young boy, a 12-year-old boy, and he was carrying a small Torah. He came inside, and he started to join the circle, and he started to dance around. Rabbi Berlin got so excited. He said, a younger Yid mit a heilige Torah, a young man with a holy Torah, and he's dancing, he's alive. He took this young boy, he grabbed him by his hands and started to dance with him in the circle. Suddenly the men around him became invigorated by the sight, and they too started to dance with new life and new vigor. And that young Yid represented the future Doiros, the Doiros that are going to learn Torah one day. Well, the dream of Rabbi Berlin, Baruch Hashem, has evolved. Torah in America flourishes. And Ura is taking those young boys who might not be holding a Torah, they're giving them a Torah, a younger Yid, mit a heilige Torah, and they're having them dance on a Simchas Torah. They're giving them a Simcha for Torah and for life. What more beautiful sight can there be? When we talk about Ura, we talk about Yom Tovim, we have to think about the packages that Ura sends to all these families. Comes to Sukkot, you need a sukkah, Ura's there. You need dalminim. Chanukah, you get a Chanukah package. Comes Pesach, and guess who's at the door with a box of matzahs? There's Ura volunteers. And besides for the packages that they send, there's something amazing that Ura does for families. Now you know Ura that they pay tuition for kids to go to yeshiva. They bring kids to the camps. But do you know what Ura does for the families? They bring them on a Shabbos, Shabbat with Ura. They spend Yom Tovim with Ura. But for a moment, I want to focus on the Shabbat with Ura. I want to focus on it because I think that Shabbat with Ura is one of the highlights of the years for so many families. You know, I would know well because I myself was on a Shabbat with Ura. And I had the Shabbos of my life. When I was there with Rav Chaim Mintz leading the way and all the Ura volunteers coming together with the families, and I saw the spirit that was in the air, I was mesmerized. I was so inspired. Now, the Ura does an amazing thing. They go ahead and they take families, and they don't just put them into a dining room. They pair each family with a Frum family. So there I was paired with a family from Staten Island, the Cohn family, an Israeli-American family. And I was supposed to make a connection with them, a kesher with them that would last past this Shabbos and throughout the year. I was thinking, so here they are. They put me together on this table with this, family, and I got to make a connection with them. What do I have in common with this family? So I tried to strike up a conversation with this Mr. Cohn. And I found I didn't have too much in common with him. The only thing we had in common was that I liked to dip my chal in baba ganoush, and so did he. But as I looked around the table, I noticed that his daughter, Adeli, was at the table too. So I turned to Mr. Cohn and I said, is your daughter in Shidduchim? Is she looking to get married? And he said, yeah, it's hard to find a good guy out there. So I said, you have the same problem in your community that we have in ours. It's always hard to find a good guy. I said, I know some people out there. Maybe I know someone for your daughter. And now I'm thinking to myself, oh no, what did I just say? I don't really know anyone. Who do I know that's Israeli American that would fit with the Cohen family? And once I said it, I said, you know what? I have to go through with I have to go through with it and try and offer some suggestion. So I'm thinking to myself that the only two Israelis that I know are two young men that work in the supermarket near my home, Kosher West. So I tell my wife, you know what? Maybe one of these two guys is for this Adeli girl. And she said, come on. That's not how shidduchim work. I said, what do you mean? She's Israeli, they're Israeli. One of them, I'm sure, would be a good shidduch. So she said, okay, whatever you think. So it was right after that Shabbos. I went over to this Adeli girl. I said, so what do you think? I might have someone for you. What are you looking for? So she says to me, you know, I grew a lot with Ura, and I came a long way. But recently, I've been falling. I'm out of school for a number of years, and I don't know how I'm going to hang on. And if I find someone, the right person, perhaps that would give me a new start in life, and I could become what I really want to become in life. So I said, okay. I took down her number, and I said, I'm going to be in touch with you in a couple of days. When I got home back to Lakewood, I immediately went over to the supermarket. I'm thinking, so which of the two guys should I go over to? And I chose one of them. His name was Yossi. The only reason I chose him because he looked a little like this Mr. Cohen. So I go over to Yossi and I said, you know, Yossi, I was at a Shabbat with Ura. It was amazing Shabbos. I met this amazing girl. Her name is Adeli. And I'm thinking maybe this would be a good shidduch for you. So he asked me a couple questions, and right away he says, you know what? Rabbi, I trust you. It sounds good. Okay, easiest shidduch I ever tried to set up. I go over to Adeli, I call her up, and I said, you know what, Adeli, I have this great guy, his name is Yossi, and he agreed to go out. What do you say? And she said, sure, Rabbi, I trust you. Oh boy, here I was. So I started making my matchmaking business over here. And the two of them went out, and they went out again. And for weeks and weeks, I hear that it's going very well. And a few months later, I hear, Mazel Tov, they're engaged. I couldn't believe it. They're engaged. And they called up the rabbi and said, Rabbi, we're having the engagement party on Sunday night. We want you to be there, and we want you to speak. I'm like, oh no, I'll come to the engagement. What am I going to speak about? Anyway, that Sunday, I happened to be in Staten Island, and I spoke to some of the boys in RJJ. And after I spoke to them, I was leaving the yeshiva. Rabbi comes over to me, and I tell them, you know, tonight I'm coming back to Staten Island for a vart. He says, whose vart is it? I said, this girl's name is Adeli. She says, Adeli, you know, you have to speak to Mrs. Newman, because Mrs. Newman was her teacher, and she has a great story for you. I said, story? I love stories. I want to hear it. I contact Mrs. Newman, and I tell her, what's the story with this Adeli? And she says, I got to tell you the story, Rabbi. So she says that she was Adeli's teacher in second grade. And she was teaching Adeli. Throughout the year, she kept up a kesher. And as they went through the school system, Adeli was making amazing progress. But recently, over the last couple of years after she left high school, she saw Adeli slipping. She noticed it when Adeli came to pick up her brother from school. When she came, she wasn't dressed the way a Beis Yaakov girl should be dressing. So she came over to him and said, Adeli, how you doing? What's been going on with your life? And Adeli told her the truth, how she was slipping and she wasn't what she used to be. Mrs. Newman started to cry, and she said, Adeli, you're such a precious neshama. You know, we need you to come back. You need it not only for yourself, but you need it for your future generations. Adeli, one day, you're going to want Hashem to answer your prayers. You're going to want to get married. You're going to want to start a family of your own. And with what merit are you going to turn to Hashem that He should answer you? Adeli, promise me that from now on you're going to keep Shabbos. And Adeli made a promise that I'm going to do my best from now on to keep Shabbos. From that day on, Adeli kept Shabbos. It wasn't always easy, but she did it. When Mrs. Newman told me that story, I said, now I have a speech to say at that vart. When I came to the vart Sunday night, I spoke about Adeli, how she kept Shabbos, how difficult it was for her, how she did it. And I spoke about Yossi, how he kept Shabbos. Although it was hard, he was about tshuva and he kept Shabbos every week. And then I spoke about Shabbat with Ura, that united this family. And I spoke about how Ura brought Shabbos and brought them all together. And Baruch Hashem, a new family was built in Klal Yisrael. And you know, a few weeks ago, I got a phone call that I became a Zayda because Adeli, Baruch Hashem, had a young son. His name is Idan. So Baruch Hashem, with the help of Ura, a new mishpacha was built in Klal Yisrael. I want to tell you one more Ura story about Shabbos. There was a Torah mate, and as you know, Ura has so many programs. One of the most successful programs they have is Torah mates, where one chavrusa learns with another chavrusa, and they could be across the country, and every week they get together for a half hour and they learn with each other. So there are two Torah mates. One of the names is Steve, and one of them is Tzvi. And Tzvi would learn with Steve every week. And one day, Steve calls up his Torah mate Tzvi, and he tells him, I'm going through a hard time now. I want to grow in my Yiddishkeit, but I'm having a problem. Shabbos is a problem for me. I work on Shabbos. That's my parnasa. And if I don't work on Shabbos, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. What should I do? And Tzvi gave him hadracha, and he gave him advice. He told Steve, if you keep Shabbos, Shabbos will keep you. You got to keep Shabbos. So although it was very hard for Steve, he decided, come what may, he's going to start keeping Shabbos. So he went over to his boss and he said, listen, boss, I got to tell you that from now on, I can't come in on Saturdays. I could come in on Sundays instead of Saturdays. And the boss was very gracious, and he agreed, and he said, from now on, you got it. Steve, come in on Sundays, and you're off on Saturdays. But I have to ask you one favor. Next week is a very important week. We need you to come and work on Saturday just one more time. And then after that, you could work only on Sundays, and you don't have to work on Saturday anymore. So Steve went home thinking, oh my, what am I going to do? I wanted to start keeping Shabbos right away, and now I have this dilemma. He calls up his Torah mate, and his Torah mate reiterates this idea. Steve, if you keep Shabbos, Shabbos will keep you. All that night, Friday night, Steve was tossing and turning, thinking, what is he going to do comes the morning? Shabbos morning, he decided, he has to work one more time. Otherwise, he's going to lose his job. As he's sipping his coffee, he's looking at the table, and he sees his daughter's parsha sheet on the table. And he was amazed at the words that he saw. It said on it, if you keep Shabbos, Shabbos will keep you. He felt it was a sign from heaven telling him that this is the Shabbos that he has to keep no matter what. And Steve that day did not go in for Shabbos. Came Sunday, he went to his boss. And his boss told him an amazing thing happened. Someone with the same exact skills as you, Steve, happened to show up on Saturday, and he did the job for you. So we didn't lose out on anything. Steve, from now on, just come in on Sundays and everything will be great. Steve was so moved by the whole story that since that day, he became a Shomer Shabbos. And this is some of the things that Ura does for all those families out there. They bring them on Shabbat with Ura. They bring them for Yontif, and they leave them inspired. I want to backtrack to Simchas Torah for a moment. Simchas Torah at the Zone, when many families were there was an amazing scene that unfolded. In many shuls, the kibudim on Simchas Torah are auctioned off. And when you look at a yeshiva, you know what they do? They auction it off for Gemara and Dafim learned. And people could bid thousands of blat to learn in order to buy some of those kibudim. And so too at Ura, they were auctioning off kibudim for blat learned. So there were many counselors that were there, and they were buying many kibudim with their blat they were learned, and they were bidding hundreds and thousands of blat to be learned to get those kibudim. But then there's the young children who also want to bid. They want to buy something. They want to buy a kibud. And how should they buy one? They don't know how to learn Gemara yet. So an amazing scene unfolded when one boy raises his hand and said, you know what? I want to make a bid. So the one running the auction turns to him and says, what would you like to bid? He says, I offer to wear my tzitzis for 2 weeks. And everyone was stunned. This boy was offering to wear his tzitzis for 2 weeks straight in order to get a kibud. Then another person raises his hand and he says, I want to also bid. I'm going to keep Shabbos for a month straight. And then one boy, youngest boy over there, he raises his hand and he says, I'm going to learn Torah for 2 hours this Yontif. And that's my bid. These are the bids made by these young children. How precious these bids are in Shemayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom looks at his children, what nachas it brings him when he sees his children making the effort to come closer to him. I want to conclude with a beautiful vart and an amazing story. When the parsha speaks about how Yosef was sold by his brothers. Torah teaches us that the brothers came to Yaakov with a cloak, the cloak of Yosef, drenched in blood. And he showed Yaakov this cloak, and Yaakov started to grieve and cry. And with Misabel, he mourned over the loss of his beloved Yosef. And the pasuk tells us, "Vayikumu kol banav v'chol benosav, vayemoyin lisnachem," that all his children came in front of Yaakov, and they tried to bring him nechama, but Yaakov could not be consoled. And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh asks a question. He says, what was it that the children of Yaakov were trying to console him with? The Torah doesn't tell us. So says the Orach Chaim that the children of Yaakov gathered in front of their father, and they consoled him by bringing the ganze family, all his sons, all his children, all his daughters, all his grandchildren came in front of him. And they came in front of him and said, "Tate, we're all here in front of you. We're all here. Here's your nechama. We're here just because you lost Yosef. Not all is lost. You still have us. We're your nechama, Tate." To this, Yaakov said, "I don't have a nechama. As long as Yosef is gone, as long as my beloved son is not here, there is no nechama. There can't be any nechama, because one child of mine is lost." So I heard Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein say that we have a Avim Shabbat Shemayim. We have a Father in heaven. Our Father in heaven says, as long as one of my children is lost, even if all my children come in front of me with Torah, mitzvahs, and they're learning and they're performing, but one of my children are lost, one of them don't know anything about Torah, one of them don't know what it means to love their father, I am still crying, I am still mourning, and I cannot be consoled. A father, as long as he doesn't have his child, can never be consoled. Ur is the father for so many of those children out there. Ur is the father that's trying to bring the children back. They're trying to bring them back to Avim Shabbat Shemayim. They're going out there and they're teaching them Torah. They're trying to bring Nechama to the Rabbi Shalom and say, "Look, Rabbi Shalom, all your children are here. It's the greatest Nechama, it's the greatest consolation that you can ever imagine." I want to conclude with one last story on this topic. Every year in the Baba Beis Medrash comes along to the Aseres Yimei Tshuva, there's a great gathering. Hundreds of children gather together to say Tehillim. We all know the power that children have to say Tehillim. Their tefillos pierce the heavens. So all these children are gathered in the Baba Beis Medrash, and they're ready to say Tehillim. And all the children were gathered, hundreds of seats set up, and they're all sitting there. And in the front of the Beis Medrash, in a place that was reserved just for children, there was an old man sitting there. So one of the Askanim that was there went over to this old man, and he said, "Excuse me, but this place is reserved for children." And the old man said, "No, I have to stay here." And they said again, "Please, you have to find a place in the back. This place is only for children. We'll find you a seat. We'll find you a seat in the back." And he said, "No, I have to sit here among the children." So the Askim was looking at him, wondering why. And this old man reaches into his pocket and unfolds an old, wrinkled, worn-out paper. It was a picture, a faded picture of two little boys. And he says, "You see these two children? These are my sons. They were taken away from me by the Nazis so many years ago. But I can never forget them. And any time that there's a gathering of children and they're gathering to say Tehillim, they're gathering to learn Torah, father and son, I try and be there because I know that my sons are looking down from Shemayim and they're joining that gathering. And so I have to sit here amongst my children because I'm their father, and I can never forget my children." Rabbi say, Ur is that organization that will never forget any of Hashem's children. They're there when the child needs them. They're there to give them a little Torah and say, "Here's your Torah. Here's a Heilige Yid with a Heilige Torah. A young man who has an opportunity. He has so much potential to become a Ben Torah, to grow and to become adult. Ur is with them from childhood until they grow up and Mitzvah Hashem build a family of their own. And that's the greatest nechama that we could give to the Rabbeinu Shel Olam. That's the one thing that will finally bring consolation to the Rabbeinu Shel Olam, who looks at all his children, who looks to see, where are my sons? Where are my children? And when we bring them back with the help of Ura, that brings nechama to Hashem. And when we bring nechama to Hashem, be'ezus Hashem, Hashem is going to bring the greatest nechama to us by bringing the Geula Shalema b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.